Hi, my name is Callum Reyes, and 3 years ago, my entire life bled out over a Thanksgiving table. I can still smell the turkey skin burning, hear my fork clink against the plate when my wife cleared her throat and announced she'd found someone who could finally satisfy her. I thought it was a cruel joke. Then my little brother walked in from the kitchen, shirtless, smug, and my mother laughed like it was the best punchline she'd ever heard. 15 people I loved watched my marriage die and my dignity get carved up next to the bird. No one stood up. No one even looked away. I didn't flip the table. I didn't scream. I took one more bite, swallowed it past the shaking in my throat, and told them, very calmly, that by Black Friday, they'd all be back at my feet. The thing is, I wasn't sure yet if I believed myself. I don't remember driving home. I remember the keys cutting into my palm, the sound of my own breath scraping in and out of my chest, and the way the city lights smeared through the windshield like someone had dragged their thumb across a wet painting. But the miles between my parents' house in Cedar Hills and my apartment in the Pearl District? Blank. Shock does that, I guess. Turns your brain into static. When I finally stepped inside my loft, the silence hit harder than anything my family said to me across that table. It was the kind of quiet that feels alive, heavy, watching you, waiting to see if you'll break. I closed the door gently, like a man trying not to wake something sleeping on the other side. For a long time, I just stood there, coat still on, shoes still wet from the drizzle. My hands were trembling, and the stupid part is, I kept wiping them on my jeans as if I could rub off the humiliation still clinging to my skin. Like it was something physical, like it could be scrubbed away. But the laughter kept replaying, my mother's cackle, my father's disgust. Dorian's grin, God, that grin, like he just won some championship I never knew we were competing in. And Sienna. The calm in her voice when she said I'd never satisfied her, as if she were discussing a faulty kitchen appliance, as if our years together were something she could just unplug and toss in the trash. I pressed my palms to my eyes until little bursts of light flickered behind them. Anything to drown out the memory. I wish I could say I cried. It would make me sound more human, less like whatever numb, hollow thing I was in that moment. But there were no tears. Only this cold, controlled anger settling into my ribs like cement. It scared me a little, how steady it felt, how sharp. My phone buzzed. A notification, then another. Group chat messages from relatives who had happily watched the show. A text from Sienna that said, I think we should talk. 2 missed calls from Dorian because apparently betrayal looks better when followed by forced brotherly bonding. I turned the phone off. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up my dark apartment, and something in me clicked into place. A gear shifting. A dam cracking. I typed one name into the search bar, Elias Stone, my business partner, my friend, the one person who didn't treat me like a spare tire on the Reyes family car. He picked up on the second ring, voice groggy. Cal, it's Thanksgiving. You okay? My throat tightened for the first time all night. No, I said, but I will be. It's time. He didn't even ask time for what. He just exhaled slowly. Reyes and Stone? Yeah. I'll be at the office in 10 minutes. We hung up, just like that. No questions, no pity, just action. Funny how people who aren't bound to you by blood can still feel more like family. I made 2 more calls after that. Quiet, careful ones to clients I'd been cultivating relationships with for years. Not stolen clients, not poached. Just conversations that began with, "Hey, big changes are coming. Might be worth keeping your options open." They understood. People always understand more than families think. Last came the third call, my lawyer, to file the papers, to cut the last rope tying me to Sienna Vale. By the time I hung up, my hands had stopped shaking. I sank onto the edge of my bed and stared out the window at the wet streets below. Portland was draped in that low silver fog it loves so much. Quiet, dim, reflective. It felt like the whole city was holding its breath with me. A vibration buzzed against the nightstand, my phone lighting up again. But this time, it wasn't Sienna or Dorian. It was a single message from Leora Rowan, my aunt by marriage. The only person at that table whose eyes hadn't glittered with amusement when my life fell apart. Her text read, "Callum, I'm so sorry. What they did to you was cruel. You didn't deserve any of it." Just 12 words, but they cracked something in me. The first sign that maybe I wasn't insane for feeling torn open. I stared at her message a long time before locking the phone. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the window. Inside, I breathed in, slow and steady. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. I didn't know how much damage I could do, or how quickly the structure of my old life would collapse. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tonight was the last night the Reyes family would ever own a piece of me. And somewhere beneath the wreckage of what they'd tried to destroy, something new had already started to rise. By the time the sun scraped across my windows the next morning, I'd slept maybe an hour, maybe less. My mind kept looping between two images: Dorian's smirk under the kitchen lights and the blank email template I'd left open on my laptop. A rough draft of a future I wasn't sure I was ready for, but knew I needed. I showered, dressed, and walked through the drizzle toward the small downtown office space Elias and I had toured months ago, back when starting our own company was a someday fantasy, a future dream. Something we whispered about after long shifts at our old firm. That morning, standing under the gray Portland sky, it no longer felt like a dream. It felt like survival. Elias was already there, leaning against the glass door with 2 coffees and the kind of look you give someone who's about to jump off a cliff but swears they're fine. "Rough night?" he asked. I huffed a laugh. "Something like that." He handed me the coffee. "Then let's make it worth it." Inside, the office was empty except for folding chairs, mismatched desks we scored off Craigslist, and a whiteboard with Reyes and Stone scrawled in shaky marker. It looked nothing like a real company, but it felt more like home than the Reyes household had in years. We spent the morning on calls, permits, licensing, finalizing insurance policies, the foundation, the rebar, the stuff real companies are built on. Around noon, a notification popped up on my phone. Lucian Hale wanted to call. I hadn't spoken to Lucian in months. He used to work with Dorian, well, around Dorian, back when Reyes Construction was still pretending my brother had potential. I answered, half expecting some backhanded congratulations or a lecture about loyalty. Instead, Lucian said, "Callum, is it true? You finally broke away?" I sat on the edge of my temporary desk. Yeah, it was time. He let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Good. You deserve better than the circus over there." Circus. Funny how everyone outside the family knew exactly what it was. We talked for a few minutes before he dropped the real bomb. "Look, I don't know if anyone's told you, but Reyes Construction has been a mess for months. Dorian overpromised on 3 major timelines and missed every one. Your dad's been patching holes with duct tape." I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course it was already falling apart. Another pause, then Lucian lowered his voice. And Callum, everyone knows you're the reason that company had any stability. People trusted you. They still do. My throat tightened, not from sadness, but from something like the first breath after being underwater too long. When we hung up, Elias looked at me over his laptop. Good call. Better than I expected. Then prepare yourself, he said, tapping the screen, because Morrison Construction just emailed. They want to meet. Today. Morrison, the account Dorian had practically lit on fire, a $200,000 annual contract that had been slipping through my brother's fingers like wet cement. I checked the email twice to be sure. No, it wasn't a scam. No, it wasn't a mistake. We should go, Elias said. We're not even set up yet, I told him. He shrugged. Neither are they. We left the office and walked through the afternoon drizzle toward a cafe on Alder Street, the kind with reclaimed wood tables and baristas who judge your coffee order like it's a moral failing. The Morrison rep, Brenda, was already seated. She didn't bother with small talk. We heard you're branching out, she said, and frankly, we're tired of excuses from Reyes Construction. I kept my tone even. I won't badmouth my family's business. No need, she said, sliding a folder toward me. Their work has already done that. Inside the folder, photos of late-stage framing errors, timeline breakdowns, and a copy of their complaint letter, one my father never showed me. This, she said, tapping the mess Dorian made, is not acceptable. But your work, Callum, we've always trusted. My chest tightened again, this time with something warm, dangerous, and unfamiliar. Validation. We want to transition our contract to Reyes and Stone, she finished, effective immediately. Elias shot me a look like he might explode from holding in his reaction. I nodded slowly. We'd be honored. And there it was, the first major block in the foundation of my new life. As we walked back to the office, Elias clapped a hand on my shoulder. You realize what this means, right? Yeah, I said. It means we're in business. No, he said. It means your family is about to feel you leave. The words sank deep, heavy, true. That night, alone in my apartment, I drafted more emails to suppliers, subcontractors, architects I respected. My hands still smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. My mind buzzed with possibility. But under all of that, buried but present, was the memory of the night before. Dorian's arrogance, my family's laughter, Sienna's cold dismissal. It didn't hurt less, not yet. But the pain was shaping itself into something sharp, something useful. When I shut down my laptop, the city outside was quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like it was watching me break. It felt like it was waiting for me to rise. For about 12 minutes, I let myself believe the silence would last. That maybe, just maybe, my family had decided to lick their wounds privately while I built something real for the first time in my life. 12 minutes. That's how long peace survives in a Reyes household fallout. Because at 8:14 the next morning, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another number. Then another. By the fourth, I picked up out of morbid curiosity. Callum? The voice was soft, breathy, and familiar in the way a paper cut is familiar. You don't forget where it happened or how badly it stung. Sienna. I hung up before she finished saying my name. A moment later, a voicemail appeared, then another, then 5 more. Her tone shifted each time, like spinning a wheel of emotional manipulation. Voicemail 1, apologetic. Voicemail 2, crying. Voicemail 3, angry I wasn't responding. Voicemail 4, nostalgic, talking about the good years. Voicemail 5, whispering that she'd made a terrible mistake. I listened to none of them. I deleted them all. By noon, the call stopped. Not because she gave up, because someone even more persistent took over. Marjorie Reyes, my mother. The guilt campaign began where all suburban psychological warfare begins. The gym. I was on the treadmill, earbuds in, zoning out to the dull thud of my feet on rubber when a manic cloud of perfume and nostalgia swept up beside me. I didn't have to look. I knew. She waved, already smiling like we were two old friends catching up. "Sweetheart, fancy seeing you here." I paused the treadmill. "Mom, you look tired," she said. "Are you eating? Sleeping? You haven't been home in months and—" "Mom, I'm not doing this here." Her eyes widened with manufactured hurt. "Doing what?" "I'm just checking on you. After all, we've always been so close." I had to laugh at that one. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. She followed me as I walked toward the exit, clutching her tote bag like she was gearing up for a marathon of memories. "This distance is killing your father," she said. "He hardly sleeps. He's worried sick." Translation: Harold doesn't like consequences. Harold wants his workforce back. Harold wants the son who cleans up his favorite child's messes. I didn't answer. I shoved open the door and stepped into the drizzle. She hurried after me, her voice rising with desperation. "So you're throwing away 29 years of love over one bad day?" I stopped walking. "One bad day?" I asked quietly. "Mom, Thanksgiving was just the grand finale. The entire show was a lifetime of you all treating Dorian like he walked on water while I was the janitor who delivered miracles on demand." Her mouth twisted like she was confused by my audacity. "We loved you both equally." I laughed so hard the woman passing by actually jumped. "Right. Equally. Which is why, when Dorian crashed his car, you bought him a replacement. But when I crashed mine, you told me to get a job and figure it out." She flinched, a small crack in her polished facade, but she rallied fast. She always does. "You're jealous," she snapped. "You always have been. And now you're punishing the entire family because you couldn't handle that Dorian is more successful with women." I nearly choked on the cold air. "Successful? Mom, Dorian is broke, unemployed, in debt to credit cards, and probably his yoga instructor. Meanwhile, I'm running a business I built myself. So remind me, who's winning?" Her cheeks turned pink, anger, not embarrassment. And then she played her ace. "Your father's health is declining," she said. "The stress of this situation is making it worse." There it was. The nuclear button. I looked her in the eye. "You're manipulating me. How dare you accuse me of—" "Goodbye, Mom." I walked away as she sputtered behind me, but the campaign wasn't over, not even close. 3 days later, she ambushed me at my favorite lunch spot, walking in with a stack of photo albums like she was auditioning for a tragic one-woman show titled The Ghosts of Callum's Childhood. She sat at the table next to mine, opened the albums theatrically, and began narrating loudly. "Oh, look at little Callum on his first day of kindergarten. He was such a sweet boy. And this one, Christmas '98, the matching sweaters." People stared. I wanted to sink into the floor. When I stood to leave, she followed me outside, waving a photo album like she was serving a subpoena. "You're breaking this family apart. We always loved you. Your father cries at night." She piled lie after lie like sandbags around my feet, hoping one would weigh me down enough to drag me back home. I didn't budge. But the worst part, it wasn't the guilt. It wasn't the manipulation. It was the look in her eyes. She genuinely believed her revisionist history. She truly thought she was the victim. That I was overreacting to a little family teasing, as if public humiliation was a joke, as if betrayal was a punchline, as if decades of dismissal were harmless quirks. I left her standing there in the drizzle, clutching photos of a childhood she never really saw. That night, my phone buzzed again. Not Sienna, not Mom. Dorian. A text. Bro, can we talk? I think you're blowing this out of proportion. I stared at the message until my fingers went numb. Then I powered off my phone, because that was the moment I finally understood the truth. None of them got it. Not a single one. And the more I pulled away, the harder they would try to drag me back into their narrative. The one where I was the problem, where I was fragile, where I was supposed to absorb the damage and smile politely. But I wasn't their scapegoat anymore, and they hadn't even started panicking yet. The guilt campaign didn't work, and when Reyes guilt fails, Reyes hostility is never far behind. I should have expected the escalation. My family has always treated emotional manipulation like a team sport, but the speed of it still caught me off guard. The first strike came from the one person I naively thought might sit this out, Grandma Ida. She called one gray morning while I was reviewing project schedules with Elias. Her voice shook the moment I answered. Oh, Callum, sweetheart. This will be the first Thanksgiving in 60 years without the whole family together. I don't know how I'll survive it. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Grandma, I'm not coming. But why? She cried. We all make mistakes. Family forgives. Your poor mother is distraught. There it was, the signature Reyes reframe. No accountability, only weaponized emotion. I softened my tone. It was Grandma, after all, but told her gently that I needed distance. She kept crying, sobbing even. The kind of sobbing meant to force a grandson into rescuing her feelings. When I finally hung up, Elias looked over from his desk. That sounded fun, he deadpanned. I sighed. They're circling. Let them, he said. You're not a lighthouse. You don't exist to guide them home. Easy for him to say. He didn't grow up in the eye of the Reyes storm. The next blow was more theatrical. Dorian sending photos of the Thanksgiving table, my name card, my chair. A spot carved out for me like I was just running late to my own humiliation. The texts underneath each photo were worse. We're saving your seat. Family isn't the same without you. You don't have to be dramatic, man. I didn't respond, but something hollow cracked deeper inside my chest. The seat wasn't for me. It was for the version of me they missed. The obedient placeholder who absorbed impact so their favorite could float. Then came Uncle Rowan, self-appointed mediator, calling during a site meeting. Callum, my boy, we need to fix this. Families weather storms together. Let go of the past and come home. The past? The past was a Thanksgiving crowd cheering while my life burned. I'm not coming back, I said simply. He sighed dramatically, as if he were the wounded party. It's childish to hold grudges. I hung up before I said something I wouldn't regret. But the real battle didn't start until Harold entered the ring. My father wasn't a man of apologies or understanding. He was a man of control, of reputation, of commanding a room by sheer force of personality. So, of course, he didn't call to ask how I was. He called to accuse. When I answered, his voice was cold steel. Enough is enough, Callum. This stunt you're pulling has gone on long enough. A stunt. My boundaries were a stunt. He didn't even pause before continuing. Your mother is miserable. Your brother is trying to fix things. And I will not have my family torn apart because you can't handle a little teasing. Teasing. He called my wife, leaving me for my brother, in front of him, teasing. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles went white. Dad, I said slowly, you all humiliated me. You're being dramatic, he snapped. I raised you to be stronger than this, not petty. Petty. Right. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Lucian Hale called. Hey, listen, he said quietly. Your dad's been saying things, little things, to the wrong people. My stomach tightened. What kind of things? That you're ambitious to a fault, that maybe you're cutting corners at Reyes and Stone, nothing provable, just enough slime to raise eyebrows. Of course he was. Classic Harold strategy. If you can't control someone, tarnish them. I thanked Lucian, hung up, and sat in silence. Elias finally looked up. He's trying to smear you, isn't he? Yeah. Well, Elias said, leaning back, let him. Our results speak louder. He was right. But it still stung. The casual cruelty of a father willing to poison his own son's reputation to keep him in line. The moment everything truly snapped was Thanksgiving morning. I was making breakfast, eggs, bacon, coffee, enjoying the rare quiet of a holiday alone. The city outside was still asleep, wrapped in fog. At 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. I thought it was a neighbor, maybe a package. When I looked through the peephole, my breath caught. There they were, all of them. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. Even Dorian, wearing a suit like he was attending either church or his own sentencing. My father held flowers. My mother cradled what looked like an apology cake. Grandma Ida clutched her purse like it was a life raft. The whole Reyes circus troupe, standing outside my door like an intervention staged by people with no self-awareness. I opened the door a few inches, but I didn't step aside. Harold launched into his monologue, part CEO presentation, part emotional hostage situation. We've all made mistakes, he began, but family matters more than pride. We were wrong to embarrass you. We want to make it right. My mother added trembling tears, Oscar-worthy, as always. We miss you so much, she whispered. The holidays aren't the same without you. The apology cake trembled in her hands, and standing behind them, Dorian stared at me with the expression of a man who'd lost everything and still didn't understand why. It should have been touching. Instead, all I felt was the familiar squeeze in my chest, the one that always came before disappointment, because even then, even drenched in fake remorse and desperation, they still didn't get it. They weren't here because they valued me. They were here because they were losing without me. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood the difference. I didn't invite them in. The cold morning air spilled through the crack in the door, drifting across their perfectly rehearsed tableau. My father, stiff as an oak beam, my mother trembling just enough for sympathy, Grandma Ida clutching a tissue before the tears even started, and Dorian in that ridiculous suit, looking like a man auditioning to play remorseful brother number 2 in a low-budget drama. I kept my body angled in the doorway, blocking their entry. A gate, a boundary for the first time in my life. My father cleared his throat, shifting into his CEO of Family Dynamics voice. Callum, he said with solemn authority, we are here because we love you. We're willing to admit we crossed a line and hurt you, and we want to repair that. He said it the same way he'd pitch a deal to a reluctant investor, strong posture, lowered voice, eyes steady, selling sincerity like a product he barely understood. My mother stepped forward immediately, tears rolling like she'd opened a faucet. "It's been so lonely without you," she whispered. "We've barely slept. We miss your presence, your calm, your maturity. You're the glue of this family." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Nothing about this was funny. But because it was the first time she'd ever admitted that I was the one holding everything together. And even now, she didn't understand what that actually meant. Grandma Ada dabbed her eyes dramatically. "We just want our family whole again. This rift is tearing us apart." Behind them, Uncle Rowan nodded sagely, like this was a tribal council meeting, and I was the only one refusing the sacred handshake. And then there was Dorian, staring at the ground, hands clasped, a picture of artificial humility. I braced myself for whatever script he'd been assigned. He didn't disappoint. "Callum," he began, voice cracking in all the wrong places. I need to tell you the truth." My stomach tightened. Not because I wanted his confession, but because I already knew it would be coated in self-preservation. He took a shaky breath. "Everything I achieved was handed to me. Everything. And everything you accomplished, you actually earned." My father shifted uncomfortably, but didn't interrupt. Dorian continued. "I've been living in your shadow for years. And the Thanksgiving thing, the whole reveal, it was me trying to feel superior for once. Just once." A breathy sigh escaped him. "Sienna said it would be cleaner that way, more final. She said you wouldn't chase her if we made it public, cleaner, final, humiliation as closure." He kept talking, mumbling about insecurity, jealousy, how he'd spent his whole life trying to prove he was better, only to realize he wasn't. But his words felt thin, flimsy, like wrapping paper over something rotten. I asked the one question that mattered. "Would you have apologized if Sienna hadn't left you broken, humiliated?" He froze, his mouth opened, closed, opened again, no sound. And that silence, raw, exposed, ugly, was the most honest thing he'd said all morning. My father stepped in immediately, voice sharpening. "That's enough of this," Harold barked. "This stubbornness has gone on long enough. We came here to apologize. You should at least show some grace." There it was, the real Harold, the man who dressed control as concern. My mother clutched the cake tighter. "Tell us what you want, sweetheart. What will make you forgive us?" Her voice quivered in just the right melodramatic register, but her eyes, oh her eyes, were waiting for the terms of negotiation. And that's when I realized the truth. They weren't here because they understood what they'd done. They were here because the fallout had finally touched them. Their business slipping, their golden boy cracking, their family image fraying. Their apologies weren't confessions. They were survival tactics. I exhaled slowly. "You want to know what it would take?" I said. They all leaned in, hopeful, expectant, desperate. I shook my head. "The fact that you're asking that question proves you still don't get it." My mother's face crumpled. My father's jaw flexed. Dorian looked like he wanted to sink into the concrete. I continued. "This isn't about forgiveness points. It isn't a punch card you can fill by showing up with flowers and a cake. You didn't hurt me once. You hurt me repeatedly, consistently, for decades. Thanksgiving didn't break me. It revealed you." My father stiffened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I corrected. "For the first time, I'm being honest." Something flickered behind Harold's eyes. Anger, fear, or the painful realization that the son he used to command wasn't standing in front of him anymore. I stepped back, tightening my grip on the door. I appreciate the performance, I said quietly. The cake, the flowers, the whole traveling apology troupe. But you can't glue back together something you spent decades shattering. My mother gasped like I'd stabbed her. Dorian swallowed hard. Grandma Ida whispered something to Rowan, probably a prayer or a complaint. And then I said it, the truth that lived in my bones. When you showed me who you were at that Thanksgiving table, I believed you. Silence. Real silence. Not the heavy, waiting silence of earlier, but the kind that comes when denial dies. I closed the door gently, not slammed, not spiteful, just final. As the lock clicked into place, I heard my father's muffled voice from the other side. You'll regret this. Family is all that matters. And Dorian's bitter whisper, success has changed you, Callum. It's made you heartless. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the moment that door shut, the pressure eased from my chest like someone had finally cut the wire, holding it tight. The Reyes family had come expecting a prodigal son. What they got instead was a man who had finally stopped trying to earn their love. And as I stood in the quiet of my apartment, cake and flowers cooling in the hallway outside, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not yet, but certainty. The circus had come to my door, and I had refused admission. For the first time in my life, the ringmaster wasn't me, and the show was over. For a week after the apology circus, my life was the quietest it had been in years. No surprise visits, no guilt-laced voicemails, no mother showing up like a guilt-powered homing missile. Just quiet. And for a moment, I let myself believe the silence meant acceptance. That maybe, just maybe, they'd finally realized the door I'd closed wasn't one they could pry open with tears or threats. But Rhea's silence is never peace. It's the inhale before the explosion. The first hint came from an unexpected place, industry gossip. Elias and I were reviewing project bids when my phone buzzed. It was a contractor friend, Casey. "Hey man," he said, "dunno what's going on over at your family's place, but your dad's been dropping comments." My stomach tightened. Comments? You know, stuff like ambition's a gift and a curse, and Callum always wanted to move faster than regulations allow. That kind of slimy insinuation. I shut my eyes. Of course, if guilt didn't work, and begging didn't work, and crying didn't work, smearing was the logical next step for Harold Reyes. He couldn't control me anymore, so he'd try to make everyone else doubt me instead. When I hung up, Elias didn't even look surprised. "They're escalating," he said simply. "Yeah." I exhaled. I figured it was coming. "What do you want to do?" "Nothing," I said. We let our work speak. Because unlike Rhea's construction, we didn't miss deadlines, overpromise timelines, or leave clients guessing. Our projects were clean, efficient, and exactly what we claimed they would be. Truth has a way of surviving slander. Still, the smear attempt lodged itself under my ribs, a reminder that my father would rather torch my reputation than accept my autonomy. But the real shift came in January, when the holidays were officially behind us and everyone returned to their usual routines. Except my family. They had upgraded from guilt to hostility. Aunt May called, not to apologize, but to scold. "I heard you broke your mother's heart," she snapped, "over one silly misunderstanding. Shameful." I didn't even dignify it with a full conversation. I explained, calmly, what actually happened on Thanksgiving. She fell silent, then hung up. One by one, the calls kept coming. Cousins, distant relatives, people I hadn't spoken to since I still believed Santa was real. Mom had mobilized them like an army of emotional debt collectors. Each call followed the same script. Why would you leave your family over a joke? Your mother is devastated. Poor Dorian is trying his best. A joke. They kept calling it a joke, as if my life collapsing in front of 15 eyewitnesses was slapstick comedy. If nothing else, it proved that the Reyes family tree had deep roots in denial. And then came the text storm from Dorian. Gone were the weak apologies and half-hearted, "Bro, let's talk" messages. These were paragraph-long rants, accusatory, Shakespearean in their melodrama. You destroyed this family because you couldn't handle losing Sienna to me. You made yourself the victim. You're punishing us because you hate seeing me succeed. I read one while sipping my morning coffee and nearly choked. The projection was Olympic level. I didn't respond. He didn't deserve the energy, but the messages kept coming. Angry, frantic, unraveling as the days went on. His desperation was showing through the cracks like water through rotten wood. Still, nothing compared to the explosion in March. Elias and I had just landed the biggest contract of our careers, a project worth more than my father's company had pulled in the entire previous year. We were celebrating over dinner, riding the high of accomplishment built on actual competence. Then the restaurant door slammed open, and there he was, Dorian, red-faced, unsteady, looking like he'd sprinted through the rain or through his own breakdown to find me. He staggered to our table, jabbing a finger at me. "You think you're better than me?" he slurred. "You think landing one contract makes you king?" Customers turned to stare. Before I could get a word in, he kept going, louder, angrier. "That deal should have been mine. You stole everything from me. You're nothing without the family name." Management escorted us out, not gently. And in the parking lot, the real meltdown began. Dorian paced like a man possessed, waving his arms. "You stole my life, Callum. You took my clients, my parents, my future, everything. You're nothing without us. Nothing." Each word dripped with years of entitlement, years of being treated like the sun rose and set for him. And for the first time, I saw him clearly, not as my brother, not as my rival, but as a man who had built his entire self-worth on comparisons to me. If I excelled, he failed. If I succeeded, he suffocated. If I stood on my own 2 feet, he collapsed. His entire identity had been a shadow play, and not my shadow. The shadow of the version of me our parents created to keep him comfortable. The realization hit harder than his words ever could. This was never about Sienna, never about Thanksgiving, never about business. This was about Dorian finally seeing the truth he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Without the scaffolding our parents built around him, he couldn't stand. And without me carrying the weight of the family, he fell apart. Standing under the streetlights, watching him unravel, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. Their reconciliation had never been about love. It had been a rescue mission. Not for me, but for their golden boy. For the first time in my life, their chaos wasn't mine to fix. And standing there in the chilly March wind, it dawned on me. I had finally broken free. But they were just beginning to break. After the parking lot meltdown, something in Dorian snapped and something in me finally settled. Not peace, exactly, but a certainty that whatever disaster came next, it wouldn't be mine to clean up. The universe didn't waste time proving me right. Within weeks, Reyes Construction began bleeding clients. Not the slow decline of a company aging out of relevance, but a free fall. And everyone in the industry watched. I heard most of it secondhand. Contractors, subs, project managers who'd worked with my father for years. They talked in lowered voices, the way people talk about a terminal diagnosis. "Your dad's been making decisions like a man trying to play poker with Uno cards," one guy told me. Another said, "Dorian's running projects like he's speedrunning failure." Word spread quickly. Deadlines missed. Budgets blown. Blueprints misread. 2 major accounts pulled out entirely. The Reyes empire wasn't crumbling. It was collapsing under the weight of the one thing it couldn't survive: truth. For the first time, clients saw what had always been there. Competence was never hereditary, and charisma doesn't pour concrete. My father had no buffer, no stabilizer, no quiet, reliable son fixing problems behind the scenes. He had exactly what he'd cultivated: a golden child made of tin, rusting the moment weather hit. Meanwhile, Dorian's personal life became a sideshow no one asked to attend. Sienna had vanished with a yoga instructor and a mountain of credit card debt, some of it co-signed under Dorian's desperate attempts to hold on to her. His cards were maxed out. His savings were non-existent. His pride was the only thing he had left, and even that was dented beyond repair. He moved back into my parents' house. My mother complained to anyone who would listen, loudly. "He eats everything. He sleeps until noon. He's so depressed, poor baby. He leaves socks everywhere." Shockingly, the golden boy did not enjoy being treated like a failure, but the shoe fit perfectly. By May, Dorian had moved on with a new girlfriend, Melissa, a sweet waitress from a local diner who deserved better than the hurricane she was stepping into. He played the same tired routine: grand promises he couldn't keep, lavish dates he couldn't afford. Credit cards flashed like props in a magic trick. Everyone knew how it would end. Everyone except him. It was like watching someone repeat the same mistake on loop, hoping repetition would turn incompetence into talent. Then came July, a turning point I didn't expect. I ran into Grandma Ida at the grocery store. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way that sinks into the bones. When she saw me, I braced for guilt, tears, manipulation, the usual Reyes cocktail, but none of it came. She just sighed and said quietly, "Family dinners aren't family dinners anymore." I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what angle she was playing. She went on. "They're arguing all the time. Your mother blames your father. Your father blames your brother. And Dorian..." She shook her head. "He's angry, Callum, all the time. Like someone took away his favorite toy." I raised an eyebrow. "That's surprising to you?" Her lips tightened, not defensive, but regretful. "No," she admitted. "It's clearer without you there. You were always the balance." A pause. "And without you, they've had to look at themselves. They don't like what they see." The words landed heavier than I expected. For years, I thought my silence was complicity. Turns out, my involvement was camouflage. My absence didn't destroy them. It revealed them. By September, the industry grapevine buzzed nonstop. The once stable Reyes Construction was officially considering selling, not restructuring, not downsizing, selling. "Can't maintain profitability," people whispered. "Too many burned clients. Too much chaos." I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. But I did feel validation, like the universe was finally grading a test I'd taken years ago. Meanwhile, Reyes & Stone was thriving. 8 employees, a waiting list of clients. Steady growth built on competence, consistency, and honesty. We weren't cutting corners. We were cutting a path. Every week felt like laying another brick in the life I should have built years ago. The final confirmation that everything had shifted came in October at an industry networking event. I was at the bar nursing a decent cocktail when I spotted him, my father, Harold Reyes, once the most imposing man in any room. Now, smaller, deflated, defeated in a way that money, ego, and reputation couldn't patch. Our eyes met. He didn't come over. He didn't gesture. He didn't call my name. He just gave me a small nod, a silent acknowledgement between two poker players laying down their cards, one bluffing, one not, both knowing the game was over. And for the first time in my life, I felt no fear, no guilt, no obligation, just distance, healthy, necessary distance. I hadn't destroyed their family. I'd simply stopped being the glue holding together something that wasn't worth saving. And watching my father accept that, even for a second, felt like the cleanest ending I could have asked for. Because some empires don't fall. They simply return to the size they always should have been. And some sons don't abandon their families. They just stop carrying them. By the time November rolled around again, the air in Portland felt sharper, crisp enough to sting, clean enough to breathe a little easier. For 3 years straight, Thanksgiving had been the epicenter of my personal earthquakes. But this year, the ground felt steady under my feet. Elias and I had wrapped up another strong quarter. Reyes and Stone wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And for the first time in a long time, my life felt like mine. I should have known that peace wouldn't last, because chaos has a way of remembering your address. The night everything shifted. It was late, close to midnight, when I pulled into my apartment complex. I was tired, hungry, and ready to collapse into the quiet comfort of a place that didn't ask anything from me. But as I approached the stairs, I froze. Someone was sitting there, slumped forward, head in his hands. Even in the dim yellow glow of the stairwell lights, I recognized him instantly. Dorian. He looked nothing like the brother who had strutted shirtless into Thanksgiving dinners, or preened for Sienna like he owned the room. This version of him was empty. His clothes were wrinkled. His face was gaunt. His eyes, when he finally lifted them, were red-rimmed and exhausted. "What are you doing here?" I asked cautiously. He exhaled a shaky breath, the kind someone releases only after running out of excuses. "Callum, I needed to talk to you." His voice wasn't sharp or arrogant. It wasn't even angry. It was defeated. I didn't invite him inside, but I sat on the opposite step. "Say what you came to say." He nodded, throat bobbing. And then it all poured out. The first real honesty of his life. "I've been in love with Sienna since college," he confessed quietly. "But she never chose me. She always turned me down." Of course, because that was the story of Dorian's life, pining for things he never earned but believing he deserved them anyway. He rubbed his hands together. "When she married you, I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. I started comparing everything I did to everything you did." His voice broke. "You were always better. And Mom and Dad, they made it worse. They kept telling me I was the golden one. They made me believe I deserved everything." The words stung, not because they were new, but because hearing them aloud made them real. He continued, voice cracking like thin ice. "When Sienna started complaining about your marriage, it felt like a chance, like the universe was finally giving me something you didn't have. So you took it," I said quietly. He nodded miserably. "She said the only way to make it clean was to make it public, brutal, final. She said you'd try to win her back otherwise." A humorless laugh escaped him. "But she left me anyway." The moment things got hard, she left. I was just a stepping stone. He pulled at the hem of his sleeve like a child trying to hide, trembling hands. And I realized I never loved her. Not really. I loved the idea of beating you. There it was, the core of everything. The truth he'd been orbiting his entire life. He wasn't competing for love, or respect, or partnership. He'd been competing for identity. The apology that wasn't enough. He wiped his face, inhaling shakily. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. For that dinner. For humiliating you. For taking what wasn't mine. For being jealous of you since we were kids." The rawness of his voice didn't move me the way he probably hoped. Because an apology isn't healing glue. Not when the wound spans decades. "What do you want from me, Dorian?" I asked calmly. He hesitated, looked away, and then said the quietest, most pathetic words I had ever heard from him. "I want my brother back." Silence. He pressed on. "We can start over, fix things, merge our companies, work together. You handle the operations, I'll handle the relationships. We could be great together." I stared at him, at the desperation, at the delusion. He still didn't get it. He still thought I existed to stabilize him, to rescue him, to lift him. Even now, in his lowest moment, he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for usefulness. "No," I said simply. His head jerked up. "What? Why?" "Because you burned that bridge so completely," I said softly, "that even the ashes are gone." He sobbed, shoulders shaking, breath catching. "I have nothing left," he whispered. And that was the first sentence he'd spoken that was entirely true. A different kind of ending. He stood eventually, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Are you really done with me?" he asked, voice small. I looked at him, really looked, at the man who had been handed the world and still believed he deserved more, at the brother who had taken my wife, my dignity, and my place in my family, because he'd been told his entire life that everything I had was actually meant for him, at the boy who'd never learned how to stand alone because he never had to. "I'm done letting you hurt me," I said. "That's not the same as being done with you entirely, but it's the only place I can start." He swallowed hard, nodded, and walked into the night, a shadow shrinking under the streetlights. I watched him go. No anger, no rage, no satisfaction, just a quiet, bittersweet truth settling into my bones. Some endings aren't explosive. Some endings don't feel triumphant. Some endings are just necessary. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I finally understood. Forgiveness isn't a door you open for someone else. It's a lock you change for yourself. The morning after Dorian showed up on my steps, something in me felt lighter. Not healed, not even close, but unburdened in a way I hadn't expected. His confession hadn't repaired anything between us, but it had clarified every question I'd carried for decades. And sometimes clarity is all the closure you get. Life moved forward, quietly, cleanly. No ambush visits, no tear-soaked voicemails about family unity. For a couple of months, it felt like the Reyes machine had finally run out of tricks. There were days I almost let myself believe they'd accepted my boundaries, that they were learning to sit with their own damage instead of trying to plaster it over mine. But in January, the smoke signals reached me. A subcontractor I trusted pulled me aside at a job site. "Heard anything weird lately?" he asked. When I said no, he nodded grimly. "Your dad's been dropping comments about how fast you and Elias are growing. Little jabs. Stuff like, ambition can be dangerous. Or let's hope they're keeping it ethical." The kind of insinuations that don't accuse you directly, just poison the well. Classic Harold Reyes strategy. If he couldn't control me, he'd try to contaminate me. I thanked the subcontractor, then sat in my truck for a long minute, staring at the steering wheel. Part of me felt angry. The rest of me felt unsurprised. This was who he'd always been. I just wasn't holding up the facade anymore. But the rumors didn't stick. Our work spoke too loudly, too clearly. The only corners we'd ever cut were slices of cake after winning contracts my father could never dream of. Still, the attempt told me everything. They weren't grieving the loss of a son. They were reacting to the loss of a resource. By February, the calls from distant relatives started again. Second cousins I hadn't spoken to since I was 12 suddenly wanted to check in. Everyone had the same talking points, like my mother had mailed out scripts. Your poor mom is heartbroken. What happened wasn't that serious. Family forgives. You're being stubborn. I didn't sugarcoat anything. Each time I explained, calmly, what happened at that dinner table 3 years ago. Every time there was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. One cousin whispered, "They said it was a prank." A prank. As if stealing my wife and humiliating me in front of the entire family was a cute little joke gone too far. It would have been funny if it weren't so sad. A few even admitted they'd noticed the favoritism my whole life. The golden child glow around Dorian. The expectation that I'd quietly hold everything together. It was oddly validating. Like finally getting Yelp reviews confirming the restaurant was terrible all along. Then came March. Elias and I landed the biggest contract in our company's history. Bigger than anything Reyes Construction had touched in years. We went out to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just good. Food, good conversation, and the sense that we were finally building something entirely our own. Halfway through our meal, the restaurant door flew open. Dorian stumbled in, drunk enough to smell like a spilled bar mat. His shirt was half tucked, his eyes wild. He spotted me and marched straight across the room, pointing at me like I was a defendant in a trial he wasn't sober enough to argue. "You think you're better than me?" he slurred. "You think landing some contract makes you king?" Before I could respond, he started shouting, loud enough that people turned in their seats. "That contract was supposed to be mine. You stole everything. You're nothing without the family." Management escorted us out, and I found myself standing in a cold parking lot, staring at the unfiltered core of my brother's resentment. He yelled until his voice cracked, waving his arms like a man drowning in water only he could see. And in that moment, there was no anger in me, no fear, just this cold, clear understanding. This was never about me leaving the family. This was about me proving they never needed to be the center of my life in the first place. And that truth had shattered him. In the months that followed, karma didn't tiptoe. It stormed their front door. The family business hemorrhaged clients. 2 more accounts bailed after Dorian missed deadlines so badly the clients threatened litigation. My father had to lay off 3 long-term employees, including a foreman who had been loyal since I was a kid. Friends in the industry described the company as unstable, directionless, even combustible. Meanwhile, Dorian's personal life was unraveling at an even faster pace. Melissa, the sweet waitress who deserved a man who wouldn't drag her down, later realized Dorian's promises were empty and his lifestyle was funded by credit he didn't have. She left within 3 months. By June, he'd moved back into my parents' house again. My mother complained constantly about the mess, the mood swings, the unpaid bills, And Dorian hated every minute of being treated like the failure he'd always blamed on everyone else. In July, something unexpected happened. I ran into Grandma Ida again, this time at a farmer's market. She looked tired. Not theatrically tired, the way she'd looked during past guilt campaigns, but deeply, genuinely weary. When she saw me, she didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't guilt trip. She just looked sad. Family dinners aren't family dinners anymore, she said quietly. They're arguments, blame, silence. It's nothing like it was when you were there. I didn't say anything. She continued, I think I understand now. You weren't the one hurting the family. You were the one holding it together. For reasons I can't fully explain, that hit me harder than anything else had, because she was right. My absence hadn't broken them. It had revealed them. By September, whispers circulated that my father was considering selling the company, not restructuring, not partnering, selling. The empire he once held over me like a threat was now something he couldn't maintain without the son he had spent years belittling. And then came the final moment, the one that told me everything was truly over. It was at an industry networking event. I was talking with a contractor when I noticed him across the room, my father, Harold Reyes, a man who used to walk into any space and own it. Now he looked smaller, not physically. His shoulders were still broad, his posture still rigid, but something in his presence had collapsed. His authority, his certainty, his invincibility. He saw me. I saw him. He didn't approach. He didn't gesture. He didn't pretend we were fine. He just nodded once, not in greeting, not in reconciliation, in acknowledgement. Like two men at a table finally showing their hands after years of bluffing. Like he knew, fully, finally, that I wasn't coming back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of him, or responsible for him, or guilty for walking away. I just felt free. It's been 3 years since that Thanksgiving. 3 years since my life cracked open in front of 15 people and a turkey. 3 years since I stopped trying to earn love from people who never bothered to offer it without conditions. My life now is simple, clean, quiet, mine. Reyes and Stone is thriving. I have friends who value me. I wake up without bracing for impact. Sometimes people ask if I regret walking away, if I miss them, if I do anything differently. And the truth is this. I don't regret leaving. I regret staying as long as I did. The only time I feel a twinge of sadness is when I think about all the years I spent fighting for a seat at a table that was never meant to feed me, only drain me. If there's anything I've learned, it's this. You can't make people love you the right way by shrinking yourself into the wrong version of who you are. You can't fix people who don't want to change. You can only change access, lock the gate, raise the drawbridge, let the silence in. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and even for them, is walk away.